feature idea, I think features have to conform to this equation. I tell my students that if you write down one thing I say over the entire semester, this is it. A feature idea is a subject plus an angle plus an audience. Now to take each of these in turn, the subject is the overarching the overarching area your idea falls into. It might be football, or guitars, or jam, leggings, Kenya. It's not as broad as sport or music, food, clothes, or Africa, but it goes down a level from that. Then the angle, this is the aspect of the subject you're looking at. If you take jam, for example, your angle may be how to make it, how to eat it, how to store it, regional differences, its history, best flavour combinations, removing stains left by jam, the price of jam, or any of many other angles. It should never be, here is everything you need to know about jam. And your audience, well, that's who you're writing for, can be as broad as an age group, over 60s, kids, 30-somethings, a job type, farmers, chefs, waiters, students, or another defining feature, diabetics, middle classes, Londoners, home cooks, or perhaps you'll combine them, student home cooks in their 30s. I find it useful to ask students to do the very simple task of coming up with a subject, then coming up with multiple angles, then coming up with multiple audiences, and seeing which of those they can add together from each category to make a feature idea. Sticking with jam, for example, you might have an article on how to make jam, written for diabetics. You might have an article on how to make jam, written for children. You might have an article on how to make jam, written for people who live in hot countries. You might have an article on how to eat jam, written for people who live in hot countries. You might have an article on how to eat jam, written for people allergic to wheat, no scones. Or an article, you might change the subject and have an article on how to eat chutney, written for people allergic to wheat, no sandwiches. So once this concept has been grasped of needing all those, you can actually complicate the equation slightly by reminding them that usually the idea is still incomplete if you don't also have a hook. In fact, I like to tell my students you only really need a single idea to start off your life as a feature writer. And if you then continue to change either your subject or your angle or your audience each time, then you'll always have something new to write about. I think another two ideas help define a feature and that students need to know. A feature will usually make the reader an expert in a very narrow subject. And it will answer a question, though it may just be implicit. A good task for your students is to ask them to read through many features and to identify which narrow subject the reader is an expert in after reading it. And also what question is being answered, be it implicit or explicit. For the second of these, the BBC magazine website is great because they often use questions as headlines. At the time of writing my book about ideas, a single day on the BBC magazine website had 4 features using questions as headlines. One of them, Brazil noodles, just how genuine are Brazilian-themed products? That was to tie in with the World Cup in Brazil. Generation Right, are young people more right-wing than their parents were? In response to a report saying this was the case. Face Value, Why Does Scarring Continue? Which was about facial scarring traditions in West Africa. And Line of Consent, Should You Ask Someone's Permission to Kiss Them? Which was in response to the trial of an MP who said claims against him were the result of a clumsy pass rather than sexual abuse. And he was acquitted. And I think another key point in teaching feature writing is you need to give your students the confidence to come up with the bad ideas as well as the good ideas. My book contains many different tasks, suggested tasks for doing this, but one of my favourites is to get a student to take something at random from their bag, something they don't mind everyone seeing, and get in the class, yourself included, to kind of throw ideas out there. You can then show them how nothing is just a pen, or, and I don't tend to have boundaries about taking things out of my bag, just a tampon. A tampon, for example, may lead to the following ideas. The different types of tampon, with pros and cons, with teenage girls as an audience. What do women without access to sanitary protection use as a general interest feature? The environmental impact of tampon use, general interest. Types of sanitary protection, including new developments, and how we need to be open to trying new methods as we get older, perhaps for a women's magazine aimed at a 30 or 40 plus audience. How to make your own tampons and sanitary towels, maybe for the environmental pages. How the moon cup, a type of reusable internal blood catcher, was invented for the business pages. The town that makes the world's tampons, if indeed there is a town that does. The changing face of tampon and sanitary towel advertising for a B2B. And Real Men Buy Tampons, things your partner may ask you to do and what you need to know to do this properly, maybe for GQ or that kind of magazine. And by contributing your own ideas about it, both good and bad, not all of the ones I read out would make it to a commissioning stage, and making it a kind of rapid fire game rather than one you have time to think about, you encourage students to say whatever comes into their head about an object. Talking of objects, the book has a whole chapter on how to get ideas from Lego. Butler mentioned Lego in his talk. I believe in America you use a plural, Legos, whereas in the UK we would only ever use Lego as singular and plural, which of course leads to ideas in itself. Everything is an idea about perhaps, same toy, different language, and what you could do with that. I like to encourage students to develop their own lists of questions as they go and kind of keep a running list in their notebooks. For example, some of the questions I ask myself about any object: who made it? What is it made from? Are the materials rare? How are they created? Does it have an environmental impact? Is anyone exploited in getting those materials? What's the raw cost? Where is it made? Is it fashionable? What's the most expensive version? What's the cheapest version? Where can you buy it? How would you feel if you were given one as a present? Is it beautiful? Do people use it differently according to their age or gender? Is it used differently in other parts of the world? Will future generations have them? Did past generations have them? What's its history? Is it cool? Is it accessible to everyone? Do people of different ages use it differently? Are they disposable? Are they recyclable? How many does the average person own? Are there variations of the product, e.g. different colours? You must remember, I'm not just talking about tampons here.
You've had 10 minutes, Ellie.
What other uses are there for the object rather than its obvious use? Is it commonplace to own one? What would you think of someone who didn't own one? What was the last time you used one, and what would happen if it disappeared? And once you build up your kind of own list of questions according to your own interests, then any object, it could be a piece of fluff, could be a keyring, could be anything you take out your bag, anything you find, anything you see in a shop, becomes a catalyst for many, many future ideas. For example, I was once talking to a dentist at a work party. Now, in theory, dentists should have loads of stories, and I, being nosy and a journalist, have lots I'd like to ask the dentist. I want to know how good their own teeth are, what brand of toothpaste they use, whether they feel sick at the sight of someone's mouth, how often they come across bad breath, what the worst thing you can eat is for your teeth, whether they know if patients are lying to them about how much they floss, how much they give their children from the tooth fairy. I want to know what made them so interested in teeth that they became dentists, and whether it was a toss-up, say, between teeth and eyes, and they could easily have become an optician. If you're a human dentist, could you be an animal dentist, and so on. This dentist, as I found many dentists are, was really, really dull, didn't answer anything, didn't answer my questions. But in turn, that led to other ideas. It made me think about people who are reticent to talk about their work, ways of deflecting conversations, and whether there's feature articles in that. What about people who actually can't talk about their work rather than won't talk about their work, such as spies? What might it like to be married to a spy or the child of a spy? So I try to teach my students it's not just objects, but any conversation, even conversations that don't go anywhere, can lead to feature ideas. I also try to teach the students, very importantly, that nothing is inherently lowbrow or highbrow. If you think about lipstick, in some articles it may just represent makeup, as in what's the best shade of red for you. In another, it may be the starting point for an article about animal testing. For another, it may be used as a symbol of female repression or emancipation. I don't think anyone will, whoever read it, will forget the Marie Claire article about women in Afghanistan, the women who just want the right to wear lipstick, which obviously was their key demand. In another, it might be lead to an article on the kind of analysis of chemicals in makeup. Or in another, it could be an indicator of economic success. So, We all know that journalists are lazy leeches who like to take ideas from other people and claim them as their own. I like to encourage my students to do this at all time. Here's a Facebook status I posted recently when I was bored. Like everybody's Facebook status is utterly dull and boring. I said, help me explain things to my 2-year-old. When is the space under a bridge a tunnel? And how long does it have to be to constitute tunnelness? Genuine conversation I had with my 2-year-old. All the responses led to feature ideas. If you get into the feature idea mindset, every conversation you have, every status update, every object you come across, every meal you eat, will lead to your feature ideas. Somebody said they were having the same conversation with their 2-year-old, which led to ideas about child development. Someone mentioned something called cut and cover tunnels, made me want to know more. A colleague told me on Facebook it had never occurred to them to ask this question before, which led to ideas for articles about how to maintain the curiosity of a toddler, when kind of women magazines talk, what we can learn from our toddlers, and others that I don't have time to go into. So I'm coming to the end of my time, so just to reiterate, if I want my students to write down one thing, it's the equation, feature idea equals a subject plus an angle plus an audience. Without any one of those, you don't have an idea. But also these 3 things. You need the confidence to get your ideas out, even the crap ones. If you find it interesting, other people will, because you're not unique. And everything can be interesting, even boring things are interesting if you try to identify why they are boring. So I have no truck with my students who don't come up with ideas after having this kind of lecture. I hope you don't either. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.